On This Week in Enterprise Tech, CenturyLink gets paid, Muni Networks make good, and Nautilus Data Technologies is on to provide some peer pressure. Twyat on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for This Week in Enterprise Tech is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Twyat. This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 156, recorded September 4th, 2015. Nautilus Data Technologies. Peer pressure. This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Braintree. If you're working on a mobile app and searching for the right payments API, check out the Braintree V.0 SDK. With one simple integration, you get every way to pay. To learn more and to try out the sandbox, go to braintreepayments.com/enterprise. And by DigitalOcean. Simple and fast cloud hosting built for developers. Deploy an SSD cloud server in 55 seconds. Try it today for free. Visit DigitalOcean.com, and once you sign up, be sure to enter the promo code TWYAT in the billing section for a $10 credit. And by ZipRecruiter. Are you hiring? With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post to 100+ job sites, including social networks, all with a single click. Screen, rate, and hire the right candidates fast. Try ZipRecruiter with a free 4-day trial now at ZipRecruiter.com/Twyat. Welcome to Twyat, This Week in Enterprise Tech. It's the show dedicated to the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and the geek who just wants to know how the world is connected. I'm your host, Father Robert Balacer, the digital Jesuit, your guide to all things in the enterprise. But of course, I'm not guiding you by myself. I'm joined by my regular cast of characters, my crew, my friends, starting with Mr. Brian Chi, the director of the Advanced Network Computing Laboratory in Honolulu, Hawaii. Brian, how are things out in stormy, hot, and yet tropical paradise, Hawaii?
I am dancing with a conga line of 4 hurricanes all in a row. Woohoo!
Your dad's card is all filled up. Now, also on the other stormy coast, I've got Mr. Curtis Franklin from Information Week Radio. Curtis, you're not dealing with 4 storms, are you?
Not 4 named storms. We have the remnants of one that seemed exciting but blew up over the Caribbean before it got to us, and nothing else really on the horizon. We're happy to let our Pacific brethren enjoy all the excitement.
Yes, well, we get all the fun on this side of the world. Now, gentlemen, we've got a great show. We're actually going to be speaking with the founder and co-founder of Nautilus Data Technologies. They're the ones who are bringing the idea of a data center on a barge, on a boat, in the middle of the water to reality. But before we do that, let's go ahead and jump into the blips. This one is all about AC for the win. Now, did you bet on early adoption of 802.11 AC wireless? If so, pat yourself on the back because you made a good call. According to the IDC, adoption of 802.11 AC products in the 2 years since the equipment started shipping is running at a phenomenal pace. Such products accounted for almost half of all controller-connected access points sold in the second quarter of 2015. That's an order of magnitude better adoption than that of 802.11n. What makes this adoption rate so unique is the fact that not only are overall wireless sales down in quarter 2, but that there is a cannibalization of 802.11 AC sales because of the imminent popularization of so-called Wave 2 AC devices. IDC expects the majority of 802.11 AC spec wireless gear to be sold in the coming year. So again, if you bet on AC, you earned some cake.
Windows 10 is running on 1.5 million business PCs. Microsoft says that Windows 10 Enterprise is running on 1.5 million enterprise PCs. Now, that's in a context of an OS that's been downloaded on 75 million PCs overall and had claimed 5% of the PC market in its first month. How does that compare to other Windows releases? Well, Windows 8 garnered 40 million sales during its first month of availability and took about 6 months to reach the current popularity of Windows 10. Windows 7 sold a little over 60 million units in its first 10 weeks. One of the things holding Win 10 Enterprise back has been a lack of transparency about the contents of the mandatory updates that Windows pushes out. Enterprise members of the Windows Insider program will see a working version of Windows Update for Business in the near future, and the number of Windows 10 enterprise licenses should continue to grow.
Well, he hacked his girlfriend's pancreas and found love along the way. Aww. In a story very close to us, Scott LeBrand, a past Interop NOC team member, was dating a girl that had to live with an insulin pump since she was 14. In super geek fashion, he and Dana Lewis came up with a way to constantly monitor her blood glucose levels and use a security vulnerability in a discontinued insulin pump. The Raspberry Pi sends reports to a Pebble watch for monitoring so they can identify blood sugar incidents quickly and even out her glucose levels instead of the previous spikes. They are keeping the FDA informed of their progress and hope to one day release this system to the world. To Scott and his bride Dana, I just love geek stories. Good luck to you two.
CenturyLink has made a move. Now, internet speeds in the sticks, not so good. That's more or less a given in a world in which DSL and cable technologies just can't quite reach rural, sparsely populated areas of the country. For those poor bandwidth-challenged folks, options have been limited to dial-up satellite and maybe cellular data. But if a new partnership between CenturyLink and the FCC performs as expected, perhaps the boonies are about to get a broadband boom. Kinda. CenturyLink has announced their intentions to accept $3 billion from the FCC's Connected America Fund in exchange for pushing broadband to 1.2 million households and businesses in 33 states. Although it should be noted that the 10 megabits per second download speed that they're required to deliver doesn't actually meet the new definition of broadband as set by the FCC. They'll be taking the subsidy in annual $500 million payments spread over 6 years and are expected to deploy a network with those speeds of at least 10 megabits down, unsure of what the upload speed will be. While $3 billion does sound like a lot, it should be noted that it's still far less than the $200 billion that the larger telcos received to essentially do the same job, a task at which they ultimately failed. Time will tell, but for now I say, let's see if CenturyLink can deliver.
Speaking of high speed, Cisco is giving Apple an enterprise network fast lane. Apple moved a little farther into the enterprise through a joint announcement with Cisco this week that promises, quote, a fast lane for iOS business users, end quote. The two companies said they'll work together to make tools such as Cisco Spark, Cisco Telepresence, and Cisco WebEx function seamlessly on iPhones and iPads. The announcement was thin on details, but analysts see this as a significant move by Apple to help boost the flagging sales number of iPads. Following last year's announcement of an enterprise partnership between Apple and IBM, the Cisco network news makes it more obvious than ever that Apple doesn't see itself as just a consumer company. Now, the enterprise market gets to see whether enterprise-specific apps, a serious network speed bump, and the long-rumored big-screen iPad can get CIOs excited about signing purchase orders for business tablets.
Well, the FCC sounded like they're going to make modifying your home router illegal, but the FCC is looking at a new set of regulations that would make it harder for users to modify their home routers. At first, it sounded like a death knell for things like DDWRT, but the reality is clear as mud. Seems the intent was to prevent users from configuring their devices to go outside legal frequencies and/or power levels, either purposely or through ignorance. It's sounding like the FCC is just trying to prevent the public from shooting itself in the foot, and they'd like it make it harder for ignorant changes to interfere with our neighbors. The public comment period ends October 9th.
Hey, iPhone users. We're friends, right? We're bros? Yeah, well, come a little closer because I want to tell you something. This is why you don't jailbreak your iPhone. Last week, we ran a story about how BYOD was the weak link in enterprise security. This week, kind of the same, but not really. According to Palo Alto Networks, almost 250,000 jailbroken iPhones have been infected with the Key Raider malware that compromises iTunes account information, usernames, passwords, unique phone IDs, and App Store activity. Additionally, the malware borks the recovery of infected iPhones. The hackers released software that allows more unscrupulous individuals to charge purchases to affected users' accounts for a fee. That software has been downloaded more than 20,000 times. The short and sweet of the story, don't jailbreak your iDevices. Folks, that does it for the blips. When we come back, we're going to jump into the bites. But first, let's go ahead and take a moment to thank the first sponsor of this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Now, let me ask you something. If you're building an app, if you're a developer or on a team of developers, at some point you're going to look for a way to include financial transactions. That's just the way of the world. You're going to need to get paid. Well, you could do it the old way. You could buy yourself a back-end server. You could make sure that it gets patched properly. You could integrate it with your software, with your app, with your service. And then you could also make an agreement with some sort of payment processor and worry about exposing the information of your customers. Yeah, you could do all that, but why? You don't have to, because we've got Braintree. Braintree is the easiest way to integrate a payment solutions into your app or service. If you're building a mobile app and searching for that simple payment solution, you owe it to yourself to check out Braintree. Their V.0 SDK makes it easy to support multiple mobile payment types, starting with Apple Pay, PayPal, Bitcoin, Venmo, and all major debit and credit cards, all with one simple and fast integration. Now, if you're a developer or just looking for an easy way to accept payments, then you're going to love their SDK. They document everything. And if you have any trouble integrating, you can call them. You can actually have them on the line, and they will guide you step by step. The code supports Android, iOS, and JavaScript clients. The SDK is in 7 different languages: .NET, Node.js, Java, Perl, PHP, Python, and Ruby. And with that simple snippet of code, just 10 lines, you'll be able to accept all the payment types your customers want, even 130-plus different country currencies. Now, Braintree has the best in-class customer service, and they understand that it's not enough to have easy-to-integrate code and top-notch service. They get that you're offering your financial services and your reputation through their service, and so they get your security. They use tokenization to make sure that private data is never going to be exposed, and basically they give you that warm fuzzy at night knowing that your application is secure. Now, if you haven't thought about trying Braintree, it means that you really haven't thought about your business model. You can't lose what you don't have, and Braintree is the best way to make sure that you have it all. Braintree gives you an easy way to accept multiple payment types with one integration. Quick, knowledgeable developer support if you have any questions, and they let you start accepting Apple Pay, PayPal, Bitcoin, Venmo, cards, and whatever's next. You got to try it today. To learn more, and for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to braintreepayments.com/enterprise. That's braintreepayments.com/enterprise. And we thank Braintree Payments for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Let's go ahead and jump into the bites. This first one is sort of a deep dive replay. You may remember that 2 weeks ago we had on a guest, Christopher Mitchell, the Director of Community Broadband Networks at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, on as, our expert of the development of municipal networks. That's right. That's networks that cities, towns, counties have developed on their own with bonds or with taxes in order to build out an infrastructure that, well, quite frankly, the larger telcos just won't do. Oh, there was a lot of very good conversation, actually heated conversation on both sides after that episode. People who were writing in, who were tweeting, who were asking questions about whether or not this is actually good. Were there really good examples of a municipal network that has succeeded? What were the bad examples? What were the failures? Why did they fail? Well, this week, we've got a great example. Vibrant, a municipal network run by the city of Salisbury in North Carolina, just announced that they will be offering a top-tier service of 10 gigabits per second across their city, both to businesses and residents. Vibrant has a very familiar origin story. For years, the city tried to get big telcos to come in and upgrade their infrastructure past dial-up and slow DSL. And for years, they were promised that the service was coming, was just around the corner. Finally, about 5 years ago, they gave up. They realized that the big telcos were just never going to come because they would never earn back their investment. It didn't make sense for them to spend their capital on a smaller city like Salisbury. So they built their own. Now, 5 years ago, they started building out that network, and they saw something interesting. Every time they upped the speed that was available on the network, it increased demand. Not just demand from residents, but from businesses. And they started to see businesses move into the area because of the good internet broadband. Now, last year, in partnership with Calix, Vibrant offered 1 gigabit services, and it was snapped up. So this year, just 1 year later, they're now offering 10 gigabit services. Cheebert, let me throw this over to you. Is this a success story? I mean, yes, Salisbury isn't Los Angeles. It's not San Francisco. It's not New York. It's not a major metropolitan area, but it's not the sticks. It's not a horrible tiny little town. We're talking about a sizable city. Did they give us a rallying cry to say, look, this not only can work, but it can spark your economy?
Hey, If I could get a gig symmetrical for $105 a month, I'm there. I want to send you your money, man. Come on. I think that's a big, big, big win. I think it's a great model, and I wish Honolulu would do it. I'm pretty sure Kurt would love to have it in Gainesville, and I think should be a wake-up call. I think more and more of these are succeeding. I think more and more of these are going to send a message that, I'm sorry, Comcast, Time Warner, and so forth, you guys are charging too much for too little. Let's have some competition.
Right.
And let loose the dogs of competition, right?
I love those dogs. And speaking of competition, listen to these prices. So if you wanted the 1 gigabit per second symmetricals, upload and download, it's really expensive. It's $105 a month, which is nothing. I mean, that's what our school is paying now for, I think, 15 megabits per second. If that was too much, you could buy $45 a month for 50 megabits per second symmetrical, which is interesting because you figure that that's what most of the residents would do. But their data shows that even when customers started at that level, eventually they went up to the gigabit. Even those customers who didn't think they were going to do much on the internet realized there's actually a benefit in having a faster connection for just a little bit more. Now, for the 10 gigabit per second, it's going to be $400 a month. So it's a considerable amount, but that's not out of the realm of possibility. In fact, the city itself recognized that they're really rolling that out for businesses. They see that as an enticement for businesses outside of the area to come in and get ridiculously fast speeds for what is actually a ridiculously low price. But they're already seeing some residential customers sign up for the 10 gig. Curtis, let me throw this over to you, because this is one of those interesting facts that came out of this whole case study, which is you think you know how much broadband, how much bandwidth people are going to use, but every time you provide a certain level, they always want more, and they're willing to pay more. It's almost as if it's a self-sustaining circle of broadband want, broadband provision, and broadband want.
Well, you know, this is an interesting case. I was just, while we were going through that, I was checking with a couple of things, and the 10 gig is obviously a business play because, let's face it, almost no residences are going to have the internal infrastructure that would allow them to take advantage of a 10 gig connection to the internet. There's no reason to do it if all you've got is Wi-Fi in your house, or even if you've got gig through the house. It's just overkill. For businesses, though, it's a huge thing, especially on that symmetrical side, because that means all of a sudden you can host a really high demand web server on your premises and have connectivity to the wider internet. It's that gig for $100 a month that is really killer, because I was looking, you know, that is much faster than anything you're going to get from a telco for anything less than probably $10,000 a month. And it is much better than anything you'll get from most of the lease line providers. You know, companies like CenturyLink are going to charge you major bucks for something like that. I was trying to look back. I live in an area where we do have a municipal service. Our electric utility, Gainesville Regional Utilities, is owned by the municipality, and they also have data services, GrewNet and Grew.com, that makes such things available to businesses primarily. And this is much better than their prices on any of this. So I applaud them not only for the basic service, but for the pricing level of those. I think it's going to be a major attraction for a lot of businesses that are looking for a place to go. And I can see this being a model for a lot of other smaller towns around the country that are frankly worried about losing population to the big cities.
Cheever, when Kansas City got Google Fiber, we did see an interesting phenomenon of businesses, internet businesses, startups moving over because they could get very inexpensive property or very inexpensive rents. They could get a lot of really, really cheap broadband. And really, in today's age, that's all you need for a modern startup, right? I mean, unless you're actually delivering product, you just need to make sure that your connection is stable. Can we start to see that happening throughout areas that may have decent access to the internet backbone, but don't really have a population center. You know, I'm thinking even go beyond Salisbury. Go to really, really small municipalities in certain states that don't have a lot of population. If they were to start saying, look, we can give you 10 gigabits per second for $100 a month, and all you got to do is buy a piece of land, does that become attractive, or do you still get attracted to the coasts?
You know, my personal opinion is a lot of this is all about balance. You know, it's not just internet that a corporation's going to want to, entice a corporation to move. It's going to have to be some other things: transportation, utilities, tax structures, and things like that. It's a balance of all of the above. Now, on the other hand, when you and I have a good friend that lives in Kansas City and works on the Interrupt show with us, and his comment was, there's been a really interesting shift in businesses in the Kansas City area moving into areas that have Google Fiber because of the Google Fiber, and the rest of things being equal. So if all things are equal and the tax structure and utilities and so forth are available, yeah, I think good fast internet might actually start enticing corporations to move a little further out of the metro area into smaller towns. This might be the new thing. You know, it used to be shopping malls and schools. Well, now it's going to be shopping malls, schools, and fast internet pipes.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, let's go ahead and move on to the next bite. This one's actually, it's a sleeper story, but I think it has some serious impact on the enterprise. We are starting to see the rising cost of the H.264 codec. It's a licensing fee that a lot of manufacturers are no longer happy with. And you don't find it just in, say, camera products that are using AVC HD, but you're seeing it also in telecommunications products and in enterprise-level video conferencing products. So it does directly impact what we do as IT people. Chibert, I want to bring you into this because I think you, of the three of us, you're the one who knows the most about this. Why is the licensing fee going up, and why have manufacturers finally had enough?
Actually, the license fee doesn't look like it went up dramatically. It's just that the license is being applied differently. So the guys over at ZDNet actually highlighted a few interesting things. But the big change is this paragraph from the MPEG Licensing Authority. This software is licensed under the AVC Patent Portfolio License for the personal and non-commercial use of a consumer to encode video in compliance with the AVC standard, blah, 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 or decode. No license is granted or shall be implied for any other use. So it's basically the people that are doing open source and the people that are doing free, like VLC, no longer have the free ride because they're not charging. The MPEG LA, the licensing authority, is basically saying, hey, I'm sorry, you know, we're just going to evenly apply this to everybody, and we're going to change how much we charge based upon how many units you put out. And that's going to change a little bit too. So the change in licensing on who gets it, who doesn't get it, who pays for what, changed enough that the rumor mill is just a buzz about Netflix, an unknown source at Netflix saying, hey, this kind of change might put us into Chapter 11, which is, wow, that's pretty big. What's it going to do to a lot of other things? Like universities, we do a lot of streaming video for our science. Does that mean every player that we put out for the science team has to be paid for? It's a big, big, big deal. So one of the big changes that a lot of the big giant players are doing, people like Cisco and Microsoft and so forth, they're putting together a consortium. And the idea is an open source video codec. What a concept. And the goal is to make it as good or better than the new H.265 that the MPEG License Authority is saying, well, we're going to stop giving out licenses to H.264. You're going to have to go to H.265, but oh, don't worry, it's backwards compatible. And oh, by the way, start start forking over the money.
Curtis, I want to bring you up on some of the points that Chibert brought in. You know, this idea that this little change could actually affect big streaming companies like Amazon, like a Netflix, like Microsoft, like Cisco even, who all incorporate H.264 into products or services that they offer. It reminds me that it wasn't too long ago. It was what, maybe 8 years ago, we were having very much the same discussion we're having right now, which is there was a consortium of companies that got together and said, look, these licensing fees are ridiculous. And they started developing an open standard, including Google, trying to figure out, well, can we create something that everyone can agree on and we'll all use it for free? There'll be no licensing on this. You just make the best product that you possibly can. And eventually it fell apart because the licensing agency saw the threat and they said, no. We're not going to use our patents. We're not going to use our intellectual property to penalize you. We want this codec to spread. We just want a fair licensing fee. And eventually that consortium fell apart. How much pain, this is like the same discussion we had when we were talking about the upgrading of the credit card infrastructure. How much pain do the members of the consortium have to go through for them to actually complete their project, for them to make a new codec, for them to vet it with the legal system, make sure it's not going to run afoul of any existing patents? But, you know, how much of a danger do they have to be in to actually go through with the threat to make a competing standard?
Well, I think that the odds are pretty good that this time we'll actually see another video standard come about. One of the things that's changed in the last 8 years is that the internet has become video. If you look statistically, the internet is all about video. Everything else is statistical noise in terms of its use of the internet and, frankly, of a lot of enterprise networks. So I think that we will actually see a competing standard come about. Now, the big question is whether MPEG LA decides that it can push some of its traditional licensees to stick with the MPEG, the H.265 model, or whether there's going to be some real competition. I suspect we're going to see some real competition and end up in video the way we are in the still image world, where most things support not only GIF and TIFF, but JPEG and a bunch of others. I believe that the MPEG LA is going to find that they have overplayed a hand that isn't nearly as strong as they believe it to be.
And that's actually what I'm hoping for. But I want Chibert to have the last word, because I can see you in my monitor and you've got that ranty look on your face.
Thank you, Padre. Okay, so to put it bluntly, the MPEG LA has certainly overplayed their hand. You can tell when you get monsters like Cisco, Mozilla, Google, and Microsoft all starting work on their own video codecs. Now, what's happening, though, is the MPEG LA has managed to tick off these giants enough that they're actually going into the same room and saying, hey, let's start putting together something we can all agree upon. And this consortium actually represents enough endpoints, both sources and destinations, that is a massive, massive number of endpoints, enough that if those guys stop using all the MPEG LA licenses, MPEG LA might shrivel up and die. God bless them. But it's also part of the IETF. The NetVC working group has already started work on it, and it's actually based on the Mozilla model, DALA, and a little bit of Google VP9, VP10. The big trick is the problem with all IETF working groups, or IEEE working groups, is getting all these egos in the same room to agree upon a standard. That's going to be the challenge. Now, if they can figure that out, life is good, and the MPEG LA might actually die.
And Magcale, I just want to say that words of wisdom that my parents used to give me when I was a kid. And that is, you done screwed up. Let's go ahead and move on to the next segment. Now, when we come back, I'm going to be bringing you over to VMworld. We had a chance to drop by the show here in San Francisco, and we stopped by our friends at Synology to find out what might be new in the enterprise space. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take a moment to thank the second sponsor of this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and it's DigitalOcean. Now, whether you're an experienced code warrior or just getting started, you know that at some point you're going to need to host your app or host your service. Now you could set up your own agreement with a data center. You can buy your own iron and make sure that you patch it up properly. Yeah, you could do all that and then worry about scaling and security and maintenance. But that's just not how we do it anymore. And we don't do it that way because we've got services like DigitalOcean that give us Droplets. Now, what Droplets let us do is they allow us to create our application, to create our services, to pack them up and then scale them as we need it. You could start as small as you need to start, and you could grow to as large as you want to grow. That's the wonderful thing about DigitalOcean, and that's why it's used by over 400,000 developers, including me. Now, DigitalOcean lets you deploy and configure your Droplets via a streamlined control panel or a simple API. You could choose your OS, Ubuntu, CentOS, Debian, Fedora, CoreOS, and FreeBSD, and a one-click install lets you quickly deploy apps like Django, Docker, Drupal, LAMP, GitLab, MediaWiki, Node.js, WordPress, Ghost, OwnCloud, Ruby on Rails, and more. All their servers are built on hex-core machines with dedicated ECC memory and RAID storage. Now, servers can have up to 20 CPUs, 64 gigabytes of memory, and 640 gigabytes of SSD space. They're highly scalable to meet the demands of a rapidly growing application or business, so you could start with just a taste. Let's say you just want to beta your application to make sure it's going to work, just to a small select crowd. Well, from that to opening it up to the world with millions of users is literally just a few clicks of the mouse. They also give you auto backups and snapshots, so they can take care of all that pesky back-end stuff, and they let you resize your Droplets as you go. You could deploy servers in regions all over the world with gigabit speeds and 99.99% uptimes, and they give you full-featured DNS management, including the use of dedicated IPs. They've got web console access with HTML5 plus SSH, SFTP, and KVM VNC for virtual desktops, and an extremely active community with a large and detailed set of tutorials and all the ways that you could use your Droplet. Now, if you want to deploy Docker, you want to set up a mail server, well, they've got you covered. And it's so easy to get started that you could deploy an SSD cloud server in as little as 55 seconds. Why wait? Try it now. DigitalOcean has incredibly affordable and straightforward pricing, servers starting at just $5 per month. There's also hourly pricing available, starting at less than a penny per hour. But we're going to make it so that you can get started today and deploy your own SSD cloud server for free. Visit DigitalOcean.com and create an account. Once you confirm your email and account information, go to the billing section and enter the promo code TWIET for a free $10 credit. That's DigitalOcean.com, and once you sign up, enter the code TWIET for a $10 credit. And we thank DigitalOcean for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we bring you out of the studio over to the Moscone Center to check out what Synology has been cooking for the enterprise. I'm Father Robert Balaser, the Digital Jesuit, here at VMworld San Francisco 2015. Now, this is the Mecca for all things virtualized. If you're looking at expanding your IT operations, perhaps giving yourself a way to grow from a small business to a large business, virtualization is in. But no matter what kind of virtualization you may use, you're gonna need storage, which is why I'm speaking with Franklin from Synology, who's going to explain what Synology has done to attract the enterprise customer. Franklin, what is this?
Thank you. This is the RC180-15XS Plus. This is Synology's first solution that utilizes dual head redundant controller solution, and it's a great product for the SME right now. This solution starts at less than $12,000, and as you can see right here, so we got the dual head system right here, and utilizes SAS drives, so that'll be SAS mechanicals, and all the expansion units come with redundant controllers. So if you want to follow me towards the back, I can show you a little bit more about that.
Franklin, I've got to ask you, Synology is known for being great in the consumer or maybe even the Soho market.
Yes.
What needs to change for you to get up to enterprise level?
This particular product is the first Synology product to leverage the BTRFS file system, a great technology that the small enterprise really needs to have snapshots and share folder quotas, and of course, the data protection against bit rot. These technologies, you can use it for various different types of industries, such as creative professionals, law enforcement, or legal authorities, where you want to store data with a HIPAA environment. The Synology XS Plus series has a hardware accelerated encryption, so that means anything that's encrypted can still run at full line speed. So with those Seagate SSDs, we can get up to 90,000 random IOPS.
All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the back here. We've already seen how we could swap out drives as we're going. Yeah. What are you going to show us back here?
So back here, what we have right here, we got the redundant, we got the head units on the top. So we're 10 gig capable with SFP plus LC or RJ45. I got my mini SAS connectors, and of course, hot swappable power supplies. Now, I did mention redundant controllers, and I'm going to demonstrate that right here. So here we go. I'm going to pull this controller out. Now, with this redundant controller, so all the new redundant controllers, so you get two controllers per system, and it does come with redundant hot swappable fans. What I mean by redundant hot swappable fans, basically the fans, if one fan fails or two fans fails, the rest of the fans will spin up to maintain cooling capacity. So if you have a problem with the controller, it automatically fails over from one side to the other automatically, and it all happens in the background. So your users will not miss a thing. And as you can see right there, as you can hear it, you hear the fans are now spinning up to maintain cooling capacity. And I can just put that in there and let the system spin back down. It'll just take a minute. So while that's being resetted here, let me plug that in. I'd like to show you more about the new BTRFS file system.
One of the other questions I have about this is you've got two versions that you're releasing of this, the 15 and the 16. What's the difference between the two of them?
So actually, you can come take a look. We have a little poster right here. So the difference, we have the RC18015XS Plus and then we have the RS18016XS Plus. The difference between the two models is this is high availability within a single stack, so you get high availability of all the Synology components. Over here, you have high availability of all Synology components and high availability of your drives. So for those businesses that want to have a lot of availability to make sure that their drives have protection against a total drive failure, this is the solution what you want to use. For the RC18015XS Plus, it uses dual port SAS. We have a complete compatibility list on our website. The other model, the RS18016XS Plus, this has SATA and SAS compatibility. And both models are still capable of scaling up to 1.4 petabytes of raw storage capacity, 10 gig capable. All that is all supported. The difference is just what kind of deployment scenario you're looking at.
Now, of course, Synology is famous for DSM. DSM has made SOHO and consumer-level NAS is so easy to use and yet very, very advanced. This looks a lot like just DSM. Is this DSM for the enterprise?
The DSM, what's the great thing with Synology DSM is that we try to keep the experience the same across our entire product line. So with Synology DSM, this is the one that's for the 18015XS Plus. The only difference between this one and some of the other DSMs out there, this is the first DSM to support the BTRFS file system, and I'll be showing you a little bit more about that. As you can see right here, this is the high availability manager. So this is how we see the two controllers and see the storage array, storage management. As you can see right here, my storage is normal, active server is running normal, my passive server is running normal. So let's take a look at the data protection manager. Data protection manager is coming out with DSM 5.2 with the new XS Plus series. This is how we do snapshots. So we can do snapshots set every 5 minutes, every hour, or every day. You can set up the snapshot depending upon your schedule. So we have it all listed right here. So leveraging snapshot is using the new BTRFS file system, and I can show you right here. I'm going to click on a folder right here. This is still within the Synology DSM. We can see it right here. We can enable share folder quotas. I've already enabled data integrity protection. That's your data resiliency against bit rot, a concern when it comes to handling large-scale backups. If, as an end user, makes a mistake, they can easily log into the snapshot folder themselves, find the time that they want to recover to, and select a file, and then copy that file and make edits, put it on the desktop, and run snapshots of that file. So you can actually see, copy and replace. So you can actually make changes to the file, and within 5 minutes, you can make another change, and if you make an error on your previous 5 minutes, you can go back and restore from it. That's the great thing about Synology do. We're trying to make the technology, enterprise-level technology, as easy and as usable as possible, and we're trying to make it accessible for the SMEs nowadays.
Franklin, if they want to find out more about what Synology can offer for the enterprise at, well, a ridiculously low price, where can they go online to find out more?
So to learn more about how the Synology XS Plus series can be applied to, say, creative professionals, creative industries, agencies, professional services, even virtualization offices, or even using it for regular file sharing and backup, where you want to back up do some Veeam backups, you can totally just go to Synology.com. That's the website you want to look at.
Franklin, thank you so very much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
We'll be talking more and more about Synology technology over the next couple of weeks. Until then, back to you in the studio. We'll be coming back to VMworld in just a bit. I actually have a segment with them on drives with Seagate and also on Docker. So stay tabbed because we're going to bring you more from the world's largest virtual machine conference. Now, you may have noticed that we've got some guests in the studio because we're going to be bringing them in just a bit. That's right, Arnold Magcale and Daniel Kekai from Nautilus Data Technologies. We did a blip on them last week when we talked about their floating data center parked just not a few miles from here. Yeah, it's right in the San Francisco Bay Area. We're going to be talking about why you might want to consider a floating data center, why you may want to consider putting your data out on the water. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take a moment to thank the third sponsor of this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech. And I'm going to start by asking you a question. Do you own your own business? Or are you responsible for the hiring in the business in which you work? Because if you do, if the answer to either of those questions is yes, you need to seriously consider the people that you hire. They're the ones who are going to determine the success or failure of your enterprise. They're the talent. They're the inspiration. They're the manpower behind your vision. Now, if you are the one who's hiring, or if you're responsible for the one who's hiring, you know that right now, this summer, is the best time to get the talent that you need. People are coming off of summer vacation, they're ready to work, they're rested, and your competitors are probably napping, which means you need to get the word out now. You need to snatch up that talent before it's taken away from you. Now, you could do it the old-fashioned way. You could go ahead and put a couple of postings, but that's not going to give you the volume that you need to get the quality candidates, which is why we're happy to have ZipRecruiter as a sponsor of this episode. Now, ZipRecruiter understands that it's not enough to find just one place to post. If you want the quality candidates, you have to post to dozens of job sites. And thanks to ZipRecruiters.com's interface, you can post to 100+ job sites with a single click and be instantly matched to candidates from over 6 million resumes. But you don't have to listen to me. Dr. Robert Martinez, our real ZipRecruiter client, wrote, ZipRecruiter has been great at every level of service. It's easy to use, professional, and the support has been second to none. We are very selective in choosing our employees, and it's very clear that ZipRecruiter is as well to offer such a great customer experience. Just post once, and within 24 hours, you can watch your candidates roll in to ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use interface. ZipRecruiter has been used by over 400,000 businesses, and you can try it now for free. Getting the right people for your company is so important. Do you really want to leave that up to chance? Today, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. Go to ZipRecruiter.com/Twyet. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Twyet. And we thank ZipRecruiter for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Let's get to my favorite part of the show where we bring in our guest. I have with me today Mr. Arnold Magcale and Daniel Kekai from Nautilus Data Technologies. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having us, Padre.
Now, we first heard about you in a blip. Last week we were talking about, well, your project to put a data center on a barge. I think we have to start with the obvious, and that is why would you put a data center on a barge?
On water. Why on water? So I've been building data centers for the past 2 decades. We started with a company, Exodus Communications. And in the 2 decades that I've been working in the industry, I've seen the technology kind of stay flat, meaning the power consumption, data centers are getting bigger, cooling never really evolved. And so about 6 years ago, I started looking into some research into ways to make a data center more cooler. So the obvious one was the water. I mean, placing them on water. Now, the notion of putting them on water, yeah, our data centers aren't going to be out in the middle of the ocean just floating around. They're actually just an extension of the pier. And that being said, that we're just using we haven't really, we're not employing anything that's proprietary. We're using products that are off the shelf, and it's a simple heat exchange, a secondary closed loop system. So what that does basically is we're eliminating all your cooling towers, your crack units, all these electronic equipment that take a lot of power in a data center. So that being said, to build a data center for on a barge that's 8 megawatts, you'll have about a 50 to 60% savings in building it, as well as the OpEx. You're looking at about 30 to 40% OpEx.
Yeah. Daniel, let's talk a little bit about that, because I mean, the theory is great. I mean, of course, you want to take advantage of natural cooling. That's why you would put your data center in a cooler place, or maybe you want to take advantage of cheap power, which is why you would put it near a big power generation place.
Right.
I like the idea of using that secondary cooling loop to just get free cooling from the water on which your barge is sitting. But anyone who's owned a boat knows that boats are holes into which you throw money. I mean, they're very expensive to upkeep. Does that actually offset the power savings from not having to provide all that messy cooling equipment? Does that offset the additional maintenance of having a data center on such a large body of water?
Right, and that's a great question, and it's one of the issues that we addressed early on as we went through the engineering process on this. And the way we've addressed this is obviously for any of the enclosures, we have special finishes on it that are marine grade that can last quite a long time. There's also special materials that are used with any of our equipment. For instance, some of the pumps, depending on the location, will have stainless steel or platinum kind of rotors on them. So we've taken all that into account, and we've built that in, and it does not affect the bottom line. We're able to maintain these just as much as a normal land-based data center, basically on the same kind of calendar. So we're good on that side. We've addressed that.
Right, right. Arnold, okay, so it's cheaper. That's great.
Correct.
But then there's still the idea of you're putting a lot of electrical equipment on top of water, and they don't really mix. So again, there's got to be a perceptual problem when you're attracting new customers to say, we want to take your gear, we want to take your data, and we want to put it someplace where it is in an imminent danger of death.
Right. So to add on to Daniel's comment, these barges are ocean-worthy, seaworthy barges. They're 250 feet or greater. They have 14 compartments. They're certified by the Coast Guard. However, they're not mobile. We immobilize them, and we use spuds to put them in place. In addition to, we also use pontoons that we put around the sides to stabilize the vessel. So the chances of it sinking or having a hole, we can lose up to 60% of those holds, and they can be punctured and it'll still stay afloat. Now, with the addition of the pontoons, that even increases that stability.
Right, right. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about something that well, we here in California are kind of touchy about, and that is we're in a massive drought right now.
That's correct.
And it has recently come to our attention that cooling water is actually quite a bit of expenditure for us. Not just the water itself, but the power it takes to pump the water that cools off the devices that we use. In fact, I was just reading, there's a report that talked about the mobile revolution. And we all think of these super efficient devices that we all carry, our phones, our tablets. And it's easy to look at and say, oh, I charge this thing once a day. It's incredibly power efficient for what I use it for. But then you look at the back end. And I think it was IDT that took the fraction of the power required to support all the services that a device might be connected to. And they estimated that every phone uses the same amount of power as a refrigerator.
That's right.
Because of everything it needs to be connected to in order to do any good. Is this approach, being so close to the water, being on the water, could you consider it more environmentally friendly? Is there any water saving? Is there any power saving?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, last year, the statistics for power, data centers use 10% of the world's power. And by us being on the water, we're not actually consuming water. We're not evaporating any water. We're simply recirculating water. And we're taking the water from the source that it's sitting on, and there's a simple heat exchange process that it goes through, and we warm it up by just 4 degrees. And that dissipates within a plume of 10 feet or so. So there's no, we're not putting any additives. We're not putting any chemicals into the bay. We're not consuming any water. We're just simply recirculating. It's a simple heat exchange. As far as power, yes, because the simple physics, it's 5 times cheaper to move water than it is air, right? That's the simple physics of it. And we're not moving any air. So the whole goal of this is we're attacking air at its earliest point, which is the exit of the servers. That's where we're attacking. That's where the heat is being met with the water. And the whole data center is going to be at ambient temperatures. There's no hot aisle. There's no cold aisle. We don't need to move any air. It takes out all the crack, the AC units, no water towers. And it's simply just the heat exchange process.
It makes a lot more sense when you break it down that way.
Absolutely.
Daniel,
Absolutely.
Let me ask you about this. Same question. So a few more fun facts. California runs more than 800 data centers. We don't see them, but they're everywhere. I mean, driving from San Francisco to Petaluma, I actually passed, I think, 12 of them that I know of, and that doesn't count all the ones that are just hidden and tucked away. We know that data centers alone in this state guzzle about 158,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools in a year. That's how much water they expend. It doesn't get recovered. It either gets evaporated away or dumped. And we know that on an average, a water-cooled farm will use up about 3.5 million gallons per megawatt of computing capacity. Do you have a better efficiency? Again, yes, you are closer to the water. You're not moving the water. You're moving the air. But how much? Can you quantify how much more efficient your process is?
It's absolutely more efficient. And to your point, that amount of water is burned off by normal data centers. For us, it's a straight pass-through. We're passing through the water, through the heat exchange system, directly back out into the body of water. We're not burning any of that water up. As Arnold pointed out, we're held to a delta of about 4 degrees when we release it out through the outlet. So we're not burning through this like through a cooling tower or evaporative cooling. We're not burning any of the water. That water is simply passed through our system straight back into the body of water. So from that standpoint alone, we're saving millions of gallons at a data center standpoint. So it's absolutely more efficient than today's standards.
Let me ask, this isn't a new idea. I've heard of ideas like this for years and years and years. And actually, there was a project to build one of these. It was a data barge like 15 years ago, maybe even 17 years ago here in the Bay Area. And it never really got beyond the planning stage. I think they got Pier space and they got the barge, and then the project fell apart. They couldn't get the funding. They couldn't solve some of the practicals. What killed those projects? What are the most difficult parts of building a data center on a barge, and how do you solve for it?
When I first started this, I was actually involved with another company that was trying to do this. Former Vice Admiral from the Navy. We were going to recycle the carquinas, those former warships, and we were going to install a data center in that, but that fell apart. I think there has to be a combination, almost a perfect storm, of the expertise of marine, environmental, and also the data center space, right? Somebody in the IT world. I come with the data center, and I connected with, and having learned from my previous project, I met a lot of people. I met a lot of folks, including the folks in the Coast Guard, the U.S. Navy, that advised us. And I think with that perfect combination, we were able to put together the perfect project. And what we did before we even started this company was we did a proof of concept. And that's where what you mentioned, it's not too far from here. And just to kind of jump to what you said when you asked Daniel, how do you quantify this? Data centers are measured, one of the biggest measurements is a PUE, power utilization efficiency. When we validated ours back in December, we did we ran through a test for 2 months. Our cooling capacity can cool up to 60 kW a rack, and we can fill the entire data center with that. But our test, when we did our pre-commissioning with our proof of concept, we did 35 kilowatts a rack, and we were able to obtain a PUE of 1.04. And one thing we noticed is as we loaded it even higher and loaded it for longer, we got down to 1.02 PUE. So that's the lowest in the industry. Nobody can achieve that. We have it that's been evaluated by big engineering firms.
Daniel, let's talk a little bit about the technology.
Sure.
So you can't just throw a bunch of boxes onto something that's floating. I mean, obviously there's some engineering that has to go into it. That's your job. You're the architect.
Yes,
you're the designer.
absolutely.
So what do you consider? I know you're drawing power from the pier, but also you've got internal power generation if necessary. What are the things that you as an engineer needed to make sure were in place so that you could guarantee those 5 nines?
Right. So it goes back to the normal kind of building for a data center, right? So you're exactly right. You have to have the power available, number one. We have that at the locations that we're looking at today. It'll be dual path transit layers into the data centers for power as well as networking. We're looking at the top tier networks at each location, building out an exchange at each location so customers connect to multiple carriers at each location. And all of that has to be considered, as well as infrastructure. So your electrical power lines, everything needs to be considered and pulled into what Arnold referred to as a PUE, right? So we're pulling in a lot of data points from that note and at a software layer to monitor all those points to make sure that we're always driving that efficiency level.
I want to go ahead and bring in my co-hosts back into the discussion. Specifically, I want to bring Chibert in here because Chibert, you actually have experience with trying to cool data centers with ocean water, correct?
Well, that's not completely true. We're actually cooling. We're actually using deep ocean water to try and generate electricity in Kona with the OTEC. And we certainly learned an awful lot of lessons about there are many, many variations on what marine grade really means. When you start mixing fairly large temperature differentials in ocean water, you get some really, really interesting dielectric properties in your pumping system. And that was one of the big reasons why OTEC is not as financially viable as everybody thought originally. But Honolulu is starting to get some experience because they're using the same concept for the Honolulu area. There's actually construction beginning on a seawater loop from the deep ocean to provide seawater, salt chill water to a whole bunch of buildings. One of the largest customers is actually the U.S. federal government for our large federal building. But I should point out one thing that a lot of our viewers need to keep in mind is a properly designed floating system is no less or no more vulnerable than a land-based data center. I just want to point out that flooding does take out a lot of data centers. And if it doesn't take out the data center, it takes out the power feeding the data centers. So it's 6 one, half a dozen the other. It just means that if you have flooding, the barge or floating system will actually float above the floods. So you actually reduce the risk of flooding.
And actually, we should point out that Chibert is an experienced person, an experienced expert, a user with that, because his campus actually did flood. They had a blockage in the, what's the name of that the river, the creek behind my old house?
The Manoa Stream.
The Manoa Stream, right. It dammed up and it flooded the campus of the University of Hawaii. In fact, there were some students who were trapped in a flooding basement of the library. So, yeah, barge, yeah, it sounds bad because you're putting it in the middle of a body of water, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be more vulnerable. But Daniel, let me ask you about that, because Bleep Blurp in the chat room, by the way, our users have great names. He asked a very honest question. Why not just pipe it in? Why wouldn't you just put it on the pier instead of on the barge connected to the pier and just pipe in the water?
Well, we have a number of advantages being on a barge, and one of them is the cost of land, right? And the availability of land and the availability of power. By using a barge, we're able to actually be deployed within 6 months. And that's from design to actually build out and having active customers in the data center. So that's one of the huge advantages of going directly to a barge.
Right. Arnold, let me ask you, who do you see as the perfect customer for this? Or let's be open about this. Is this the perfect data center for everybody?
The potential customers, like I've always said from day one, our competitors could be our customers, because we provide a data center that is much cheaper on land, both to own and to operate. And we've already talked to several providers that are looking into this, not just here, but internationally. We're also talking to the federal government. So we're talking to enterprise companies, Fortune 10 companies. So, and also, at the colo side of the world, we can, that's another customer basically what we're looking at. So it's pretty wide, it's pretty broad, who can be on here, but the bigger the company, the more efficient, the bigger the savings. So that's what we're targeting, enterprise type.
Right. I like that. And where do you see this technology going in 1 to 5 years? How does it scale? Do you just add more barges? Will you make each barge more efficient? I mean, of course, it's in its nascent state. You just did the proof of concept.
Right.
You now have some clients on board who would like you to build this.
Right.
How does it get bigger? Do you just build more barges? Do you build more efficient technologies? Do you build custom barges? Ultimately, let's say in 10 years, where would you like to see Nautilus DT?
So from our point of view, we're always going to be driving technology on the technical edge, right? We're always going to be improving efficiency of our data centers. It's not just simply adding more. We'll take lessons learned from the very first one we build, from the second one we build, and so forth. And we'll be driving research and development throughout to make sure we're always at the edge for efficiency. The way I see it, we're really taking the entire data center into account. It's not just power and cooling, it's all the resources within that data center as well, right? So we take a very holistic approach to engineering, take all that into account, and we really think that this could go global in the next 5 to 10 years.
Curtis, I want to bring you back into the conversation because you are our enterprise voice expert. You rub shoulders with executives. You understand how they think and why they think the way that they do. We've talked about several really good advantages of having a data center on a barge. You get lower power consumption. You get better access to cooling. You get much lower property rates. Does that translate into something you could sell to a CTO? Or will the CTO still be hung up on, but you're asking me to put this on a boat?
Well, I think the question is whether you're asking the CIO to build their own data center on a boat or to use the service of a data center that's on a boat. If it's the second, if you're asking them to use the service of a data center that's on a boat, then it all boils down to two questions. One, and the most important one, is how much is it going to cost me? And the second, almost as important as the first, is when I use this, will my data be there when I need it to be every time? Now, if you're asking the CIO to put their own data center on a barge, then you get into all kinds of issues, all of the ones that you spoke about earlier, as well as things like, what is my insurance company going to say about this? What's the risk analysis of the barge in a particular place? It gets into a very complex set of cost-benefit analysis, and I think that it's one where the advantages you talk about could be compelling, but it's going to depend highly based on the individual company. Like I said, if you're just buying the services of a colo company that happens to have their data center on a barge, it's a much simpler equation. There, it boils down to cost and reliability. Once you get into self-hosting, the spreadsheets get much bigger and much more complex.
Arnold, what about that? Go into full salesman mode here. So you're talking to a CTO, and after the pitch, and after you explain what you can do for them, he asks, okay, so what about cost and what about reliability? What's your answer?
Absolutely. The data centers are built to a tier 3 standard. And nowadays, data centers aren't being built to that unless the customer is willing to pay for it. Our software is very resilient to where we can replicate it in various places. So it can be written, so it's highly available. So with the whole aspect of, instead of the data center being redundant, the software is redundant because the software is much more mobile. We can move it around and it's easily available. So, you're correct. It depends on the company, but we are talking to several Fortune, like I said, 10 companies that want their own vessel and they don't want to host it and they want it internationally. Why? Because they're using it as a transition. So what they do is they build their data center on our barge until their land-based data center is being built. And literally the data center module that's on there, they crane it and they put it on land when it's built. And then they move on to the next site. And that's kind of for the enterprise companies.
Well, gentlemen, I have to say that you're doing it in the right place. We do have Marin, where people do live on houseboats permanently. That's their home, and they save a lot of money on taxes every year. Now, we're running out of time, but I will say we have planned, we're going to be heading over to your construction site over at the Naval Shipyard. We're going to give our audience an actual inside peek. Let's actually show them what the barge looks like. Let's show them what you're building, and you know, give them a better taste of what the future of data centers may look like. Does that sound good?
Absolutely,
that sounds perfect.
I want to thank both of you for being on, of course, because it's interesting. It's interesting tech.
Yes.
It's different. Anytime we get a chance to do something that we haven't done before, I think our audience finds it very exciting. But I want to give you your chance to plug this. You've been very good sports about showing off your tech. Let's start with you, Arnold. Of course, you are the founder, the CEO of Nautilus Data Technologies.
Yes.
What do you want us to know about Nautilus DT? And make sure you save something for Daniel.
Yeah, like Daniel said before, our solution is a holistic view. We're not just offering the infrastructure piece. We also have three what we call pillars for the company. And the first one's the infrastructure. The second one is our cloud orchestration. And the third one, we have a DCIM that is predictive, and it utilizes artificial intelligence. We just brought on a PhD from Stanford, and she's authored several artificial intelligence. So she's building in a lot of that into it. So if you look at it, the whole offering, we offer kind of the whole entire stack from the physical to all the way to the application. And I'll let Daniel kind of.
Daniel, you get the rest of that.
On the bone.
Daniel Kekai, the co-founder and the architect. Can I call you the master architect? Can we do
the master architect?
That's a much better
That sounds good.
I like that. So, you know, if you were to entice people to take a look at your technologies, if you were to direct them into the place that you want them to look, where would you tell them to go?
I'd definitely take a look at Nautilus Data Technologies. We give customers the opportunity to take on much more of a greenfield approach to their technology, whereas today they're kind of trapped into what's a typical build for a land-based data center. They're tied down by those restrictions. As Arnold pointed out, we can pull much above 35 kW per rack very easily. So that gives customers a chance to look at greenfield opportunities and say, look, what can I do from a technology standpoint to improve our services and uptime? And we're absolutely the right choice for that.
Arnold, Magcale, Daniel Kekai, thank you very much for joining us. And folks, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry we've reached the end. That's right. You've used up another hour listening to the best dang enterprise podcast in the universe. That's according to 9 out of 10 data center captains. Of course, I want to thank my co-hosts for being here. I wouldn't do the show without them. It's just fun every single week that I get to talk to Brian and to Curtis. Chibert, what are you doing in Hawaii other than battening down the hatches and being very hot?
Actually, we're watching live multicast video, only a 2-second delay over the satellite link from the NOAA ship, the Okeanos, and they are feeding live video from their ROV, and they're going down about 3,000 meters, which is pretty deep, and we're seeing some really interesting beasties, including the sea life that's taking over a World War I submarine that was sunk off the Hawaiian Islands.
You get to do all the cool things. I have no shame, no pity for you. Curtis Franklin from Information Week Radio. Do you have anything special on the radio that you want our users, our listeners to pay attention to?
Well, nothing as exciting as what Brian's doing out there in Hawaii, but we do have some things coming up. We're going to be looking at, and this is an unusual one, how IT folks can learn lessons from the bean counters that will help make their life easier. That's coming up on IT Life Radio this coming Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And also have a couple of print stories I'd like to let folks know about. One is up right now. Got a story on Information Week about how data is being used to fight wildfires. Talked to some of the people doing the analysis and actually had a couple of interviews with people who were calling in from their tents on the fire lines in Idaho. A couple of stories I'm really proud of. And then I spent time today interviewing the CIO of Intuit about some of their major programs, how they did it, and what's coming. That's going to be an article on Information Week in the next week or so. So follow my Twitter feed and check us out over at Information Week.
Curtis, Chibert, Always a pleasure. Gentlemen, thank you so very much. Not often do we get to talk about tropical fruit and beans and firefighters. This is a weird show sometimes. It really is. And folks, of course, I want to thank you. That's right, the person who comes back each and every single way to listen or to watch the show. We wouldn't have a show without you, and so we want to make it easier for you to get every episode of Twiat. Just go to our show page at twit.tv/Twiat. There you'll find not just all of our 156 episodes now, but also our show notes if you want to find the link for some stories that we talked about, or if you want to find out where we should send you so that you could find out more about the technologies of the wonderful guests that we have on the show. Again, that's twit.tv/Twiat. Don't forget that we do this show every Friday at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. Go to live.twit.tv and you can watch the live show, the live stream. Watch us set up, watch us tear down, and watch everything in between, including all the bloopers that we have to remove during the final edit. Also, you can follow me on Twitter. Just go to twitter.com/PadreSJ. That's at PadreSJ. If you follow me there, you'll find out who we're going to have on every episode of Twiat, what topics we'll be covering, and most importantly, you'll be able to suggest guests and topics for future shows. Again, twitter.com/PadreSJ. Finally, I want to thank everyone here who makes this show possible. Of course, to Lisa and to Leo for letting us do This Week in Enterprise Tech, and to Karsten, my super producer, and today to our substitute TD, who I think by the end of the day have worked 20 hours straight, Mr. Alex Gumpel. Alex, I don't know if you have a camera on yourself. Yeah, just wave to the crowd. This man is the Iron Man of Twit, and he makes all the buttons work properly. Until next time, I'm Father Robert Balacer, just reminding you that if you want to know what's going on in the Enterprise, just keep Twiat.